Hello YouTube, it's Lion here with Hobbies of the Man once again, and today we are doing another light novel review. Now today we will be reviewing Reign of the Seven Spellblades by Bokuto Uno and illustrated by Miyuki Ruria. This is published by Yanon, as you guys can see right there. And as far as I can tell, the demographic is shonen. That's what the internet told me, so that's what we're going for. Now the genre here is fantasy. Now, you could kind of argue that it's epic fantasy, but I wouldn't classify it as that because I'm not really sure what the scope of the whole story is going to be. Because if it stays character driven and kind of small in scale, it doesn't count as epic fantasy. But it's basically in the same vein as Harry Potter. So whatever you classify Harry Potter as, you can classify this. And adaptation wise, as far as I understand it, there is no adaptation yet. However, it's possibly likely that there will be an adaptation coming soon, since, you know, it's been translated into English and it's pretty popular from what I understand. So it's likely that an adaptation is in the works somewhere, some way. Now, we're going to do this a little bit differently from usual. So we're going to have our regular review like always, and then we're going to have a second section to the video where I will be doing a spoiler talk discussion thing where I just kind of share my general thoughts of the story without fear of without fear of spoiling stuff, because you will be aware that there are spoilers happening. I will also label each section of the review down below in the chapters so that you guys can scroll through the video and just pick and choose the sections you want to see. So let's start with the premise. Now, it's kind of difficult to decide this or how to explain it, so I'm gonna try to the best as I can. Basically, it's a magic school and the new year has begun. With it come a bunch of students, and some of the students that arrive are the ones that we're following in our story. Specifically, there's two of them that kind of are brought together by fate and destiny, or, you know, the story requirements, I guess. And basically, they have to figure out life as mages, because in this world, that's a very difficult thing. It's a lot more sinister than you would think, and they have to find a way to endure. And it's a very good story. I really enjoyed it. I think this is by far one of the best light novels I've ever read. And if this gets enough traction, this could be popular mainstream-wise, because it's so reminiscent of Harry Potter and so much in the same vein, with enough modern takes to it, that it could actually, you know, drum up a lot of interest for light novels in the Western literature sphere. Now, let's actually jump into the evaluation here, and we're going to start with the plotline. So, in general, the plotline is awesome. It's like, if you condense all three of the first Harry Potter books into a few weeks of school, and you removed a lot of the fluffy, like, elements that deal with Ron and Hermione and Harry just being friends for a while. And it's so good. So much stuff happens. There's run-ins with trolls, these things called Indus birds, which are like giant birdmen, kobolds, you know, all sorts of wacky creatures and animals and people. And there's so much awesome stuff. You know, there's sword battles, magic battles, there's school lessons with a lot of like theoretical world building in terms of the magic and the culture and the kind of ideas that surround and bind the magic of this place. And I literally have so much to talk about. It's kind of difficult to get my thoughts straight. So it's very interesting because there's so much stuff, but the story is actually pretty linear and pretty easy to follow. You basically just start at the school, you know, like the entrance ceremony. So skip all the, like, if you're reading Harry Potter, skip all the stuff at the Dursleys, go straight to the Hogwarts Express. Actually past the Hogwarts Express when they get off of it, and then they start going towards Hogwarts. It basically starts at that point, you know, parallel wise. And it starts there. There's some difficulties with getting to the entrance ceremony. And then there is a bunch of lessons and, you know, the development of the group dynamic between the characters. And then there's some battles here and there. There's some socio-political dealings where they have to basically find what they stand for and decide to fight for it or not, which is amazing. It's very good. And then a large battle at the end. And then there's some crazy interesting stuff at the end that I really cannot talk about for reasons of spoilers. So the plotline here is very good. It's very linear. It's very easy to follow, but it's jam-packed with a lot of cool action sequences and like political things. And, you know, it's just so good. And it's kind of difficult to make reviews for things that you really enjoy because you just want to say it's good, it's good, it's good. And that doesn't really help anyone, but the point is that it's very well done, and I really enjoyed it, and I think the plotline here is, you know, a contender for very good plot lines that I've read so far in light novels. it was so good that I immediately had to rethink what I said in my, what's it called, light novel video that I made a long time ago where I picked the top 3. This debunked all of them, and this is way better than all 3 of the other ones that I've read. I'll have to redo that video just because of this novel. But yeah, really good stuff. There's a lot of personal tension between our characters as well, which is really good because as much as you like action and the social political aspect, if there's no interpersonal tension, it kind of gets boring for me. So it has it all. It's very well done, very well executed. I really love this. Okay, so let's talk about characters now. They're so good. It's a group of 6 students, and they all come from different backgrounds, right? There's very interesting, you know, group dynamics that develop between all of these characters, and very good relationships between them. And it's kind of weird. They kind of like pair up, but not really. It's kind of interesting. Like, it's a group of 6 characters, and they all interact with each other regularly, you know, and very easily. But then there's also moments where they like split up into smaller groups and kind of do their own thing. And I like that. I enjoy it because it kind of sucks when you're always with the same 2 or 3 people in a story and you just don't ever expand your horizons. But that doesn't really happen here. It's not like Harry Potter where Harry only has 2 friends and everyone else is kind of irrelevant. There's a lot more people here. So let me just give you a rundown of all the characters really quickly. So our male character, our male main character is named Oliver Horn, and he is basically an all-arounder in terms of magic, and he has a mysterious background, which is very interesting. I was very intrigued with this plotline because he always says things, and then he like retracts what he says, and it's like, oh, what's going on here? Why are you acting like this? And man, it's so good. Then we have our main female character, which is Nanao, who is an Asian, with a Z, not with an S, swordswoman. She's kind of like a samurai. She follows the way of the Bushido or the way of the sword or whatever. And she's so cute. She's so interesting because she's a very straightforward, kind of like hard-headed character with a lot of naiveness and gentleness, even though she's like a ferocious warrior. And it's very interesting. I really like her interactions with everyone on the team, I guess, in the group. Then we have Shella, or Chella, I guess, who is this noble / pure blood, you know, in the Harry Potter sense, aristocratic girl with these really nice golden ringlets and a tan skin tone. And she knows a lot, and she kind of functions as the character that explains all of the like magical society stuff to all of our other characters. And so she is the person that informs the reader of how things work in this society. I really like her as a character as well. I really enjoy how she gushes over the technical aspects of magic. It's very fun. And then we have Guy, who is kind of like a combination of Ron and Neville. And he's kind of magical. He's not as far as I can understand it, he's not a pureblood, but he's not a first generation mage. But he lives in a rural area, so he's not like well equipped to deal with the magical high society, which is fine. He's okay. He kind of functions a bit as a comedy relief character, and I like him. He's not that important, but he's kind of fun. And then we have Pete, who is this studious, you know, kind of loner, and he's kind of a nerd, and he's a new blood, which is the same thing as a muggle-born or a mundane. So he's a first-generation wizard, and his family doesn't really know what's going on, but he had to learn a bunch of stuff on his own. And he kind of just like wants to stick to himself, but eventually everyone just doesn't accept that, and he becomes friends with them. And then our last character is Katie, who is this semi-rural girl. She has some amount of nobility or knowledge of the magical world, and she's well known because her parents are important characters, or important political figures, I guess. And she's strong-willed, but she is pretty naive in her beliefs. And it kind of deals with a lot of the plot line actually deals with her beliefs and her friends kind of helping her maintain them, even in a very difficult situation that she finds herself in being a wizard. So it's very interesting. I really enjoy the dynamic that they all have. The driving force is really Katie in this volume, but she's not the main character. She's kind of the person that represents the issues that are being discussed in the first volume, and Oliver and Now, who are the main characters, interact with her as a way to interact with the issues of the novel, which is really interesting. It's kind of different from how you would expect writing to go, because, you know, and like I keep up bringing Harry Potter, but it's because it's the most parallel thing to it. Harry deals with all the issues of the novel and all the things that the novel's trying to raise. Harry is the guy that's both the main character and the conduit for the story, right? And it's kind of different from how this is written. And I really like that. I think it's very interesting. We also have some teachers. We have Garland, who is the sword master teacher. We have Darius, who is like Professor Snape, basically. Kind of a ugly, really crappy guy. We have Francis, who is this really old McGonagall-esque character, but she also doesn't really enjoy how modern wizards act, and so she kind of deals with discussing the merits or dismerits of having magical swords. And then we have Vanessa, who is the magic biology teacher, as far as I understand it. And she kind of diametrically opposes Katie's beliefs, but in a very interesting way, because you, to an extent, are like, who's right, who's wrong? And you can't really pick and choose, because the issue isn't as black and white as our characters see it. And yeah, the other two students that are kind of interesting are Milligan and Andrews. Now, Milligan is an older student, and she becomes relevant to the plot. Andrews is kind of like the Draco Malfoy of this book. But yeah, very cool stuff. Lots of work on making all the characters feel distinct and have some similarities. You know, enough for them to feel like they match together as friends. But yeah, I don't know why or how, or if it was even intentional, but there's a lot of similarities here between Harry Potter characters and characters in this book. And it doesn't really bother me. I think it's really cool, and I think that's why it would actually be very easy for this to become popular in the mainstream, because there's so many similarities and callbacks and kind of ideas that we've seen before executed in a new, fresh way that is very interesting. Plus, the addition of illustrations is great. So yeah, Darius is kind of like Snape. Mr. Garland, or Professor Garland, is kind of like Lupin. Kind of a noble-esque kind of guy with some back history with the Darius / Snape character. and Andrews is like Malfoy, and you know, it's not actually detracting at all, which is great. Okay, so now the world building. Now this is what I want to talk about the most because there's so much stuff here, but a lot of it is kind of spoilery, so I will try to remove as much of that as possible from the spoiler-free section and only focus on it in the spoiler section. Yeah, so the world building is my favorite aspect here. It's very well done, and it really shines. There's a social political aspect where there's like the thing of lineage that's, you know, common in Harry Potter, but there's also, it's kind of different because it's not exactly based on whether you're magical or not. It's more like how long your life, like your lineage has gone on for. And the issue isn't necessarily racism. It's more based, or like a racist thing. It's more based on like a socioeconomic thing. More along the lines of how knowledgeable your family is in general, which is interesting. And yeah, the big problem in this book, and this is somewhat spoilery, but it's kind of relevant to talk about, is based around the issue of demi-human rights. A lot of these creatures are not nearly as intelligent as humans, but they're not as dumb as lower order animals, or dumb, I guess, because you can argue that dogs and cats and, you know, all types of animals understand you to an extent. It's just not easy to communicate with them because we can't understand them back, right? But this is different because magical powers kind of make a lot of that different, and that's kind of where the issue stems from. There's pro demi-human rights, anti demi-human rights, and it's all very interesting. The conflict here is the driving force, and it's related to Katie. And yeah, the setting of the book is very, very interesting. There's a lot of wizard culture stuff. There's swords and wands, and they're usually used in conjunction with each other. And swords seem to be rather recent. And, you know, the old people, the fuddy-duddies, the conservatives, are like the magical boomers, basically. Don't really like them. And there's compelling arguments on both sides as to why they're useful or not, which is very cool. And the sword kind of causes the thing of the title. A spellblade is a magical usage of a sword that cannot be blocked or what's it called, parried, or like you can't dodge it or block it, and it's always going to land, and it's always going to be a killing blow, or well, it's not going to be a killing blow, but it's going to make sure you win. And this is a recent discovery because they've only been using swords for around 400 years, and they're like important, but it's very difficult to talk about them. So that's where I'm going to leave it at that. And yeah, there's dueling traditions. There's different ways of using these spellblades and developing your skills. Magic is divided into a lot of different things. There's elemental, but it like goes beyond that. There's a lot of esoteric things like necromancy and alchemy and, you know, potion making, broom making, all types of stuff. There's also kind of different applications of magic. It's like disruption magic, converging magic, the spellblades, like I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of different stuff here. And, you know, wizard physiology, they're different from regular humans, although they look the same appearance-wise. And yeah, the world building is just very, very, very good. I really enjoyed it. Now, the art here is very well done. It captures the scenes really well, and there's an element of cuteness to the art that kind of belays or kind of negates a bit of that dark, sinister feel of the magic in this world, which is great. I really like that because it keeps the tone kind of light, although the tone isn't that really, it's not really that dark, although there's like inklings that it can be really dark if you let it be. It kind of alleviates a little bit of that and allows you to really enjoy the story very well. Fan service wise, there's not really anything. There's a few like small comments, but nothing really serious. There's one scene where Nanao is kind of like taking a bath, I guess, but you don't really see anything. She's like from her back or like the side, so you know it's not really a big thing. If you don't really like fan service, this one is pretty clear. You won't really have any problems with that. Yeah, so I rate this a 5 out of 5 for sure. This is one of the best light novels I've read. I finished it and I just had to sit down and relax and think about it because goddamn, it was so good. It really hit all the notes Harry Potter hit for me, plus hitting notes that I didn't know Harry Potter missed, which is very interesting. But yeah, I definitely recommend this title. It's very good. The most similar title I can think of is Harry Potter, although other magic school settings like Demon King Diamond or stuff like that would really work. High School DxD maybe. Okay, so now we are going to start the spoiler talk section. Now this is very different for me. I haven't actually ever done one of these, so do bear with me if it's a little unclear, unsure on my part, okay? So the spoiler section that I really want to talk about is the epilogue or the ending of the story. Like, goddamn, it's very crazy how we think that Oliver Horn is this, you know, nice guy, and then all of a sudden he's like this evil-esque kind of anti-hero wizard guy, and it's very interesting. I really enjoyed it. It was actually very well foreshadowed because you always thought there was something wrong or something different about Oliver Horn. And he talked a lot about the sinister effects that magic had on people. And he had this dream of never letting Katie lose her ideals. And it makes so much sense after you finish reading the book because this guy is one of those people. He's like gone. He has lost all of his morality. He moved on from all of that. And he is consumed by revenge and the usage of magic. And so that actually kind of brings up the fact of him being an all-arounder. Is he actually an all-arounder, or is he just so good at magic compared to other first years that it just seems like he's good at everything? It's a very interesting concept there. And I really want to see how the tone shifts for book 2, because now that we know that Oliver is is like this powerful kind of sinister-esque guy, I don't know that it can be as campy and happy-go-lucky as the first volume. So I'm very excited to see where that goes. The Spellblade thing was amazing. I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of interesting stuff here with that. So the one spell, one slice, or whatever thing is called, is very interesting, but I don't really understand how the Spellblade stuff works. Like, what creates a Spellblade? How does the Spellblade work? Why do they exist? And I really am excited to see where that goes and how it functions. I really like that Nanao created her own Spellblade, and I assume that Oliver will eventually create his own instead of using the one from his mom at some point, but I don't know. I'm not really sure. The other thing is, can you learn all 7 Spellblades? Or do you have to figure them out on your own? Or is every person able to come up with a Spellblade as long as they develop their skills far enough? It's very interesting, and I don't really understand how any of that works. Yeah, and like, everything about this is so interesting. I really like the talk that Francis Guildhurst had with the students about the themas. It's very interesting, right? It's like if people decided to always carry guns with them now. And I guess that's what it's trying to talk about. If most people don't have guns, the likelihood of a gunfight happening is very low. But if you give everyone guns, the likelihood of a gunfight is very high, just out of the sheer number of guns that are available to people, right? And that's kind of interesting, and it makes sense. But I think there's a lot more nuance than that, and it wasn't really covered. What was really talked about is a very direct but difficult to see situation that can occur But there was no nuancing to that because it wasn't very... It was supposed to just be convincing to the first year students that really haven't developed their critical thinking skills, right? I feel that there's more to it. There should be kind of a cultural aspect that needs to be introduced as well. Like, part of the reason why sword fights happen so much more often for wizards and wizards die more often is because they're also taught to fight with these implements, right? And in order to want to fight, or in order to develop skills, they have to fight. And developing your skill at fighting makes you want to kind of prove yourself. And the easiest way to prove yourself is by fighting, right? And in a very like kind of feudal-esque society like they have in the Reign of the Seven Spellblades, it makes sense that people would want to fight each other if they were slighted, if they wanted to prove something, and, you know, so on and so forth. So it's not really just as easy black and white as Francis Gilhertz said. The socio-political aspect is very interesting as well. I don't really think I have a side yet, but it's very difficult because there is no real-world equivalent. It's like, do we give dogs rights? Well, we already give them some rights, but like people rights, it doesn't really work to give them to a dog because a dog can't communicate with us, right? But with magic, that communication barrier doesn't necessarily have to exist. And so it's very difficult to kind of make it work, because if there's so many different varieties of sentient beings or semi-sentient beings, there's really never going to be a consensus. And so developing a government that takes into account all of them is very, very difficult. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff here to talk about, but that ending, that prologue, or like that epilogue, sorry, was amazing. I was so surprised. It really was the thing that, you know, cinched it for me, that made me realize, yeah, this is amazing. This is crazy good. And I'm curious as to what the prologue was supposed to be. Is the prologue Darius hunting Oliver's mother? And then the epilogue, the revenge of that? I'm very curious to see what that turns out to be, if it ever is explained, right? Because you never know. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. That's it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you did enjoy it, please like, subscribe, and comment down below and let me know what you thought. Thank you guys very much for watching once again, and see you guys later.